Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. It's another beautiful day here at Aoyama Park next to the Tokyo National Art Center. Life is getting back to normal here now, and the art center is actually open, or it will be open in another hour or so. It's been closed for a couple of months now. Normally it's quite a popular place with locals and tourists alike, and there's usually a lot of traffic walking back and forth in front of our building with people on their way to go to the art center. It's also a good place to make videos. Perhaps one day when they're starting to open at the normal hours, I'll go there and try to shoot a few videos. Usually in the later part of the day when it's open, it starts to get quite busy there. And I like to have a little bit of privacy when I do this kind of thing here in Japan. It's getting quite warm and humid. The summer is coming along nicely, and in July we expect it to be as hot and humid as it usually is. Most of the shops and stores have reopened, or pretty much all of the shops and stores are reopened, and many of them are back on their normal schedules, though a few are opening later and closing earlier. There's still social distancing rules in many places, but for the most part it's kind of superfluous to have social distancing rules when we're having like 30 or 40 million people, actually 50 or 60 million train and subway commutes on Tokyo's trains and subways every day. But yeah, the businesses and shops and stores still have it. And last night we decided to go out to a sushi restaurant nearby. Down the hill from where we live is a place called Gonpachi Sushi, which is a really popular restaurant and a fairly famous one in Tokyo. If you saw the movie Kill Bill, one of the scenes of that movie was filmed inside the Gonpachi restaurant. The scene with, what was the guy's name? Sunny Chiba. And this is also the restaurant where Prime Minister Koizumi took George Bush, the president, to have dinner, and then George Bush got sick and then threw up on the Prime Minister. So, despite its colorful history, it's a really good place to eat. The food is quite tasty, and though it might not be as trendy or upscale as a place like Nobu, the food is just as good, and we really like to come here. It's a convenient and nice place to eat. Anyway, today's video is going to be about another Walz camera. This will be my third Walz camera video in a month. The camera today is called the Walz Wide, which was introduced in 1957 in Japan and produced for a couple of years. At this time in camera manufacturing history, wide cameras were popular. Walz produced them, Minolta produced them, Olympus and other makers made them, and they basically were the same kind of, based upon the same idea. Scale focus camera with, wow, that's a really big bug walking in front here. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I'll take a... Yeah, it's what is called a shield bug in Japan. You don't want to handle them because they get kind of smelly. This thing flew over here a few minutes ago and was wandering around the table. I'm not particularly afraid of bugs, though my wife and daughter are terrified of them. But anyway, the wide cameras produced in Japan in the late 1950s were all based upon the same thing. A scale focus system with a 35mm lens in most cases, and full manual operation. And the Walz Wide is just a typical example of one of these, though a rather uncommon one, because Walz was not a large-scale manufacturer of cameras like Olympus, Minolta, and other makers. Like the other cameras, the Walz features a 35mm f2.8 lens. This is a 4-element Tessar design, and quite a good performer. It has a fully mechanical shutter with a speed range of bulb and 1 second up to 1/300th of a second, and a flash sync speed of 1/100th of a second. The controls and layout are quite simple. We have the film rewind knob here on the top. We have the shoe for mounting your flash gun, the shutter release button, which accepts the standard cable release, the shutter charging and film winding lever, and then a film counter on the top, which has to be manually reset when you load the film. The back of the camera is quite simple. All that is here is the viewfinder window. The latch to open the film door is located on the side. You simply pull it up and the door pops open. At the bottom of the camera we have a standard 1/4 inch tripod socket, and next to that we have the release button, which allows you to rewind the film once you've reached the end of your roll. Here we have the focusing ring located at the bottom of the lens barrel, and it goes from a range of 2 feet to infinity. So this is one of those Japanese cameras which registers in feet. Conveniently, there is a red mark at the 10-foot distance, and if you set the camera, the focus to this mark, to 10 feet, and are shooting at f/16, like on a bright sunny day, everything from about 5 feet to infinity will be in focus. If you want to shoot at a narrow aperture, say f8 or f5.6, there's a convenient depth of field scale located just in front of the ring, which makes this a really good camera for things like street photography or candid photography, because you can preset the focus and aperture, and all you really have to do is compose and shoot. It's very fast, and actually much faster than a rangefinder or SLR camera, unless you're familiar with those and are using kind of like the same system for shooting quickly. The 35mm lens has a very large depth of field, which means you don't have to be very precise in the focus to get good results. As the focal length gets longer and longer, the depth of field gets more and more narrow, and you have to become more precise with the focus. The wide-angle cameras, like the Olympus Wide, are scale focus cameras without the rangefinder. We just have a viewfinder window here, and then we have a window which allows the light for the frame lines, but no additional window for the rangefinder focusing system, because you don't have to be that precise. The only of the wide series which I know which is a rangefinder, or at least a quality rangefinder, is the Olympus Wide S, which was produced a little bit later than the Walz Wide, and it had a 35mm f2 lens, and the faster lens made the depth of field a little bit more narrow and required more precise focus. But as this is an f2.8 lens, and some of the wide cameras are f3.5 lenses, pretty much as long as you have the focus somewhere in the ballpark, you're going to get a good image. These are very well made and reliable cameras, very solid, very difficult to dent or damage if you happen to drop one. The only weakness they have is that the lens helicoid can become stuck or jammed, which is a problem with many old cameras, but which is a little more of a problem with the Walz Wide. This one, when I got it, the focus helicoid was jammed rock solid. It took a little bit of work to get it freed up, and it's still evening out now. You have to, once you get them unstuck and lubricated and all that, they take a little while to get completely smooth again, unless you pull out the helicoid and yeah, put it in a sonic cleaner or something like that. But it's not so difficult to unfreeze one of these if you have a few tools. What you have to do is you have to open the rear film door, and there's a ring which goes around the lens with 4 holes in it, and you unscrew this ring by turning it leftwards, and this will release the lens and shutter assembly from the camera. You lift it out in the front, and be careful as you lift it out, because there's an intermediary shaft which runs between the film winding system and the shutter. Lift it out, and then underneath there's a black plate which is retained by 2 slotted screws. Remove the 2 slotted screws and lift off the plate, and that will expose the focusing helicoid. Whoop, here goes the bug. So if you add some thin oil to the focusing helicoid and a little bit of solvent to thin out the oil further and allow it to seep in, you let the camera sit for maybe 30 minutes or an hour, and then give the focus helicoid or the focusing tab a good push or twist. That will usually free it back up. Then you put the plate back on, put the 2 screws back in, put the shutter back in, making sure to lift the shutter button actuator upward, and making sure that the intermediary shaft goes on the shaft which winds the shutter, then tightening the ring in the back, and the camera's good to go again. Cleaning the viewfinder on these is also not a difficult job. You have to remove this little screw here and pull off the cover. Then there's a screw which fits around the winding shaft. You need kind of a pointed tool or a pair of needle nose pliers with sharp tips. It's very, very tight sometimes. Turn that out. Remove the film winding lever by putting a screwdriver through the fork and turning it off leftwards, and then there's another nut which holds it on, and then just lift it off, and the things are quite easy to clean. The optics in the Viewfinder are very high quality and not easy to get permanently hazed, and the beam splitting mirror is not easy to rub the coating off of, so it's not difficult to clean one of these cameras up and get it going. The coating on these lenses, the amber coating on the, it's called a Walzer lens, but it's actually a Cominar lens made by the Nito company, are very durable and very hard to etch with fungus. So if the lens has fungus or haze or something like that, it's usually quite easy to clean off, and the glass underneath is usually undamaged. These are a great camera if you are interested in a very simple, no frills camera as a backup to your digital kit, or if you're interested in street or candid photography. They're very fast to shoot, and the lens is a very good performer. And also, not many of these cameras are around. You'll probably be the only one on your block if you happen to come across one of these and are out shooting with it. Anyway, I'll be posting this camera for sale on my Etsy and eBay stores. Please check the description below the video for links to my stores. I'll be posting more videos about vintage Japanese cameras soon, so if you want to see these videos, please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.